Inflation now is the highest it's been in 40 years. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Yes, indeed, inflation hit a new high of 8.6% last May. The politicians are trotting out every excuse in the book, and now someone has written a new excuse book. We're going to talk all about inflation, the excuses that politicians are making for it, and we're going to talk about a solution that might be hiding right under our noses. And ironically, a civilizational state that has become a world pariah might lead the way to curtailing inflation sharply. Before I get into this, I want to shout out to our sponsor, Conservative News and Views, link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom of that link. Lots of good merchandise there, including this t-shirt I'm wearing now. The Trumpinator saying, "I'll be back." While I'm at it, I want to shout out to another sponsor, BitNext. This is your replacement for Zoom, Slack, the Google G Suite, Microsoft Office 365, Dropbox, WeTransfer, and Chili Piper, among others. Unlike any of them, BitNext protects your content and conversations so well, even the administrators can't see it. So this is your channel for secure comms, conferencing, cloud storage, and file sharing. Best of all, everything is back-end, so you don't even need client software. If you have a browser, you can use BitNext. Follow the link and give them a try. 28 days free of charge. You can't beat that with a stick. All right, ladies and gentlemen, sit down, but don't reach for that drink. You need to be cold sober to hear this and decide what you're going to do about it. The best example of the latest inflation news comes from Bloomberg News through a site calling itself Advisor Perspectives. The Consumer Price Index saw an annualized increase of 8.6% through May 2022. That's an increase of 1% from April. The core Consumer Price Index, absent food and fuel, also rose 1%. But that might reflect fuel costs too, because that's the most prominent cost of transport of goods. The problem is, everyone expected inflation to slow down, and it hasn't. So, what shall the Federal Reserve do? The same experts whom the latest CPI figures took by surprise now predict interest rates to rise by 50 basis points or more. Now, for those of you asking, basis what? A basis point is 1/100th of 1%. So that means the Fed will hike interest rates by at least 1/2 of 1% or more. The Society for Human Resource Management tells us starkly that prices are rising faster than wages. They also break down the worst inflation offenders. No surprise here, they are gasoline, all grades, piped-in natural gas, and airline fares, in that order. Even electricity rates and food prices have risen by double digits. Politico, citing the St. Louis Fed, tells us consumers are still spending. They're probably spending it on food and fuel. But soon they're going to start skipping meals, and maybe they already are. Almost everyone agrees that this report puts more pressure on the Biden administration. That will hold especially if the Fed decides to raise interest rates. They did this once before, shortly after President Reagan took office. It almost cost Reagan a second term, and maybe only the great communicator could have survived the pain from the Fed's action. But by the time Reagan and the Fed were through, they had beaten inflation. Your editor knows, because he remembers. But so far, Biden has been making excuses, from the virus that shall remain nameless to the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. 5 months ago, his tongue really slipped, and he seemed to say inflation was a good thing, or maybe he just said that in a fit of pique. Now he, who once called inflation transitory, now admits it will persist. But one other author has written a brand new excuse book, which The Guardian reviewed. In Climatenomics, Mr. Bob Keefe blames inflation on the weather and blames that on climate change. He claims that the world is noticeably hotter and somehow ties every extreme weather event to global warming. But the review says nothing about how the medieval warm period or the subsequent Little Ice Age affected economies worldwide. Neither does the book address the real reason why inflation can even happen, which is that most of the world's currencies are fiat money. Now in Latin, fiat literally means let something be. That's a third-person command. That especially includes the United States dollar, which today is the reserve currency of the world. Representative Ron Paul of Texas has proposed an answer for 16 years, and the Fed. He made 2 speeches on the subject in 2010 and 2009. I have links in the description to both. His son, the junior senator from Kentucky, continues the refrain. Abolishing the Federal Reserve would mean redefining the dollar as a standard weight of gold or silver. One advocacy group proposes 371 grains, or 0.773 troy ounce of silver. Now, even that amount would be more than 17 times as valuable as a dollar today at current spot prices. Now, aside from rolling back prices to 1960s era levels, Danielle Kurtzleben at U.S. News and World Report speculated in 2011 on what a world without the Fed would look like. A metal or commodity-based dollar would shock the world's monetary system, of course, but that system would soon settle down because the dollar would have stable purchasing power, or nearly so. The value of a dollar might rise or fall, but its trend could stay level or rise slightly with the mining of gold. That is, unless someone finds a way to manufacture it, but that's the stuff of science fiction, not to mention medieval fable. Ms. Kurtzleben shared the opinion of one Judy Shelton of the Atlas, as in shrugged, Economic Research Foundation. Saving would become more attractive for individuals and businesses. Politicians would have to face a hard reality. All spending requires taxation to fund it. Inflation is a hidden tax. Without the Fed, the tax would come out of hiding. Boom and bust business cycles, if they didn't end, would be far less pronounced. Financial regulation could become a private matter. Interest rates would no longer be subject to political calculation. Best of all, the banking system would cease to be an arm of the government. Ironically, the best example today of a country moving to a commodity-based currency is the Russian Federation. The Western world systematically shut Russia out of its monetary system, so they couldn't get dollars even if they wanted them. So then the Russians decided not to bother. Instead, they have tied their main monetary unit, the ruble, to oil, which they have in abundance. Now, anyone who wants to buy Russian oil or natural gas must pay in rubles. Vladimir Putin, at the head of Russia, is likely not acting merely from spite. He surely knows that a dollar is intrinsically worthless, which it has been since the Federal Reserve came to be. So he wants real value for value. Now, far from decrying his policy, the United States should follow his example. Now, even if you don't like the invasion part, at least look at how he based the ruble on a commodity. That's the example we should follow. Now, is it going to take the kind of crisis Russia faced to make us do it? Only the American people can decide that. Some say the crisis is already upon us, whether from the highest inflation in 40 years or a spate of fires destroying grain elevators, chicken processing plants, on and on and on. Yesterday's inflation report tells us that the Biden administration has failed the American people even by its own terms. Other Western governments have failed their people too. Central banks will not solve the problem, but will only make it worse. Moving away from central banks to a commodity-based currency would then be the best policy. It is also part of making America a civilizational state, self-sufficient and independent. Links in the description to the article, to Ron Paul's 2 videos calling on the country to end the Fed, to Danielle Kurtzleben's intelligent speculation on a Fed-less world, and to conservative news and views. I have another link to the awesome online store and to BitNext, as I also mentioned. And if you like what you've heard, you can like this video and subscribe to this channel. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.